Hello and welcome everyone to another edition of our mentoring podcast on Making Connections, a handbook for effective formal mentoring and academia. My name is Tamara Thorpe and I am your host. And I am here today with the author of case study number 2 in chapter 19, which is about staff mentoring and development at Arizona State University. And our author is Karen Engler-Weber, who serves as the program director for the Office of the University Provost at Arizona State University. And in her role, Karen directs and coordinates the work of multiple offices, providing a variety of innovative programming, resources, and support to promote the advancement and success of women and underrepresented groups within the university system. Karen also manages a number of faculty excellence programs and international fellowships and serves as ASU's liaison to the U.S. Fulbright Scholars and Specialists Program. In addition to over 20 years of experience in higher education administration, Karen has served as an English instructor in ASU's Department of English for nearly 2 decades. And Karen holds an MA in counseling psychology and MA in English literature and is ABD on her PhD in English literature. So hello, Karen, welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here and to talk to you today.
Well, let's start by sharing what inspired the mentoring work that you do at ASU.
Great. So one of the offices that I oversee, and has actually been where I've spent quite a bit of my career at ASU, is overseeing and directing the ASU Commission on the Status of Women, which is an administrative unit at ASU that was enacted by our Arizona Board of Regents in 1992, and was really the focus and the mission is to identify and advocate for needed change in the university environment in order to enhance opportunities for women and underrepresented groups within the university system. How we fulfill our mission with the CSW is through education and empowerment. So we provide a wide variety of leadership and professional development opportunities to all groups at ASU, with a particular focus on women and underrepresented groups. And we do put quite a bit of attention on the needs of staff. Staff often in higher education and in university systems often might not get as much professional development support as they need. And so through a lot of our work, we were finding that a lot of the staff members were wanting to have conversations with other staff members, particularly leaders at the institution, to find out more about career paths and thinking about their own career progression. And so we really started seeing this as a need, that there was a lot of interest in mentoring, but not a lot of resources available necessarily for formalized mentoring, particularly for staff. We often see, and this is the case in higher education, we see lots of mentoring programs for students, focused on their retention. We see lots of mentoring programs in place to help faculty with their tenure and promotion goals, but staff, not as much. And so way back in, starting in like 2009, 2010, we really started examining the feasibility of creating some type of staff mentoring program. So we embarked on a year of research where we wanted to see, well, what is staff mentoring look like in higher education? And so we looked at what public institutions were doing in this space nationwide. We looked at, pretty much had a list of every university and we started researching it. And what we found was staff mentoring is an underutilized area of mentoring in higher education. Of all the universities that we looked at and really dug deep into, we only found like 3 or 4 that had any type of university-wide mentoring. We would see mentoring for staff that was mostly focused on maybe new orientation or maybe within a unit to help one with do their job better, but it was very, very small. But in terms of university-wide mentoring, We only found a few institutions that were doing that. And of those, none of them were really looking at development as a secondary kind of supplement and support to mentoring. So this really inspired us to think about and how we could create some type of program that would help advance our staff and use mentoring as a way to help build long-term careers for our staff members at ASU. So we really were focused on this idea of mentoring to help staff not think about having a job at ASU, but to really think about having a career at ASU and to having a long-term impact at the university and for themselves. And so we provided kind of a blank slate for us to create this program. So our program, we worked to, the foundation of our program that we started was to have one-on-one mentoring. So taking an experienced and excelling staff member who is serving in a mentoring role and match them with a staff mentee who is interested in developing their career at ASU and may want to kind of explore different career options and goals. In addition to that, our program also, and we'll probably talk more about this, also encompasses, we also wanted the program to provide leadership development, professional development, as well as peer networking and support. So kind of a package deal. And so we created the program and piloted it in 2013 and institutionalized it in 2014. And we run the program every year. And I know we'll kind of break it down a little bit more, but that we really entered the mentoring space to provide a need that just wasn't being fulfilled. And even to this day, ASU remains one of the only institutions that is doing mentoring for staff on this level and on this scale, and really thinking about staff as having, as being a career contributor to our university space.
Thank you for sharing that. And it reminded me, when I interviewed, when we had the podcast for Chapter 2, one of the things that Dr. Nora Dominguez shared is that very often when we're creating formal mentoring programs, that we're doing it for populations that might not informally have access to mentors or clear career pathways and networks. And so what you just shared and really creating something unique for staff that is often a population that is overlooked when it comes to providing clarity on career path and that being really driven by a larger goal of wanting to create a culture where people want to stay, I think is so instrumental and certainly consistent with what folks are going to read throughout the book and hear in our interviews. And I want to say for this program, in addition to being unique, you have a rather innovative model that you have used that couples mentoring and with development that you just sort of articulate. So can you tell us more about that and what that looks like and what are some of the outcomes that you see because of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really appreciated your point there about Nora's comment about, oftentimes staff don't have access to mentoring and just how extensive that is. Even with the mentees that have gone through our program, over 53% have never had any type of formalized mentoring, either, and that includes even in their educational background. So as an undergrad or in graduate school, they might not have had a formal mentor. And as high as 40% indicated that they have not even received any type of informal mentoring and what we call like hallway chats mentoring that you might have with another staff member or colleague. And so that was really eye-opening for us, and so part of that too, and I definitely want to talk more about that, is that there comes, part of the need is to then define, well, what what is mentoring and how can mentoring help me in understanding that mentoring relationship? Your question though, the professional and leadership development, we really was also is a big part of our program. And so what we do is we provide roughly about 7 to 11 programs over the 6-month program cycle that are only available to our mentoring cohort. So that is our mentees and mentors. And so we engage in a lot of different conversations in those workshops that kind of, again, are geared towards thinking about long-term career goals, career strengths. And then those are often good springboards for some of the mentoring discussions that a mentor and mentee might later have, as they meet one-on-one. Of the sessions, so we kind of have it broken down a little bit. The first kind of third of the workshops are really focused on kind of identifying your strengths. What are your strengths? What are your passions? So we have a session just on that. And then we also bring in the Gallup Strengths Finders assessment, and we provide that to all of our mentees and mentors. For a lot of our mentees, it is the first time that they are taking any type of strengths-based assessment. So it's a good exercise in them kind of understanding, well, these are some things I'm interested in. This is where my passion is. And so how does that translate to kind of a longer term career? And then in addition to that, it's not only just identifying your strengths, but promoting your strengths. So how do you promote all these things that you're doing in a space so that, your supervisor knows what you're doing and how that may align to career jumps as you kind of move forward. In addition to that, we also have a number of other kind of sessions that kind of just are general professional development that really help. One is on conquering imposter syndrome, which we find that a vast majority of our mentees are impacted in some way by imposter syndrome or have experienced kind of symptoms in that area. And they often comes up in our mentoring discussion. So we have a session just on that. And that again has been very impactful for a lot of our mentees and our mentors as we think about what are some of the obstacles that come into play as a result of feelings of imposter syndrome. Then we have some, technical things on how to kind of elevate your professional presence, both with your communication, such as email communication, and also, kind of thinking about when you want to make that next jump, to be resume ready. So we focus on kind of resume writing as one kind of dedicated session as well. And then from there, as we start to move on, we go into our leadership series. And in our leadership series, we have one that is focused on leadership in the New American University. And so one of our former deans and vice presidents of one of our, he was a vice president of our Polytechnic and downtown campuses, he comes in and he talks to us about how leadership in the New American University is defined, and our charter and our mission and how all of our work kind of fuels and really supports ASU's charter. And so that is a very eye-opening session for a lot of mentees in the program, because then they start to see themselves as not just doing a job and not just doing the business, paperwork or things like that, but that really what they're doing is they're part of a larger initiative and effort of ASU as we fulfill our charter, which is, to really serve our communities and to, promote inclusion. Multifaceted efforts there. And so that is often a very inspiring session for our mentees. We additionally have two what we call conversations in leadership. And that's where I'll bring in two high-level leaders at the university who are on staff track positions. So non-faculty leaders who come in and talk to us about how they develop their career at ASU and offer insights into leadership and different opportunities and how to advance. And it's kind of it's a smaller group session, so it provides a great opportunity for for mentees and mentors to ask really detailed questions of our leaders at ASU. And so throughout all of this, our mentees get a lot of different knowledge and a lot of different space, how to create what we call our ASU brand. So they develop a greater sense of who they are at ASU, how they contribute to ASU, and how they can grow at ASU. And so those are, so it is very, very tailored towards the ASU environment, but it really kind of all, between all of the sessions, it kind of all comes together. And a lot of our mentors and mentees talk about how those sessions have really fueled really impactful and meaningful mentoring discussions that they subsequently later have with their mentors.
I think that's so powerful, because I think that, one of the things that we often see in traditional one-to-one mentoring programs, at least I see in my experience and the role I sit in, is often mentors feel a lot of pressure to know everything and to be able to provide all the psychosocial support as well as the practical support, and that can feel overwhelming. And so providing these type of development opportunities, it then does some way take some of the pressure off the mentor to know everything. And I would imagine, Karen, as part of this, you are finding that you probably have mentors who are sitting in some of these sessions who are learning things for the first time.
Yeah, and that's so true. We actually have a lot of times when our mentors start into the program, they will attend all of the sessions. We do tend to repeat a lot of the sessions from cohort to cohort, so sometimes they'll sit through them again. But it's funny because some of the mentors come back to me and they say, I actually feel really guilty about how much I'm getting out of this experience. I feel like I'm the one that should be teaching and not learning, but they find it that it's even people who have been in the university system for like 20 years still find it a really great refresher. And as you said, it does really help. And one of the things that we do with the CSW program is we don't look as mentoring as being the only source of support for career success for staff members. So it's the primary foundation of our program, but having these development sessions is to also provide that support. And then in addition, which we can talk about as well, is we also have peer coaching groups so mentees will then meet together and also talk about some of the things that they're learning in the development sessions. And so they meet, and that's outside of their meetings with their mentors. And so they also get that peer support there too. And so having the support from a lot of different areas is really a more complete picture of career success support that I think is much more we're finding is more impactful for our mentees as they go through the program.
And thanks for that. And if we could just share, because I think, you've got such an innovative model here, and the case studies in this book are really designed to give people a sense of what a program can look like. And I think yours is a very good example of using different approaches to achieving your goal. But I think the goal is, and all of this work is very much informed by the operational definition you created for mentoring. So can you tell us about that process of creating your operational definition and how much that informed the program that you ultimately built?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we really look at mentoring in this program as being focused on providing a kind of a safe space for a mentee to do their kind of career exploration and kind of think about where they are in the ASU system and think about where they want to go longer term. And maybe that's just in the position that they're in and they want to advance, or maybe they're interested in learning about a totally different aspect of the university. And so the mentoring discussions are meant to support that exploration. So we really look at the program as very mentee driven. So the mentees are really, and their needs and their interests and their goals really drives the mentoring relationship. So we encourage the mentees to really actively communicate to their mentors. These are some of the things that I'm wanting to work on during the 6 months in this program. And the mentor is there to help support and guide that. And they don't, and we really make it very clear that mentor doesn't have all the answers, and they shouldn't be looked at to have all the answers. And mentors that come into our program don't have to have mentoring experience prior to this. We provide training. We also provide resources in terms of questions that can be explored for the mentor and mentee throughout that 6-month process, so that all of it is really designed to help the mentee kind of voice what they're needing and voice where they want to go, and really and the mentor is responding to that, and the mentor is helping to guide and maybe ask the questions or provide the feedback as it relates to that mentee goal. And sometimes it's also connecting that mentee to other resources too. So they might be like, well, I'm not an expert in this area, but let me connect you with my colleague who does that type of work, and it'd be great for you to do an informational interview with this person. And so we really look at it as very, our mentoring approach is, it's one-on-one, but it's very mentee driven. And every mentee is going to be different in terms of what they're coming into. And so we try to provide a broad spectrum of resources and training to our mentors, so that whatever mentee they get, they have the tools to help and to be there. And I will say that, the foundation of our training with mentoring and with our mentors is to listen. A lot of times it's listening is the most powerful tool that's used in the mentoring relationship.
Yeah, no, I agree. I always tell, leaders that listening is your leadership superpower, right? And that could be so much more powerful than trying to provide the perfect set of advice or solutions, for sure. So let's talk about that mentor matchee, because the matching process with your mentors and mentees, because I think what folks will find as they read through the case study is that you have a very robust and successful matching process. So can you tell us a little bit about your process and why you think you've had such great success with it?
Yeah, thank you. So we, with the mentoring process, it really starts at the time of application. So we ask mentees to, when they fill out their application, we ask them questions about, what's your career trajectory so far? Where do you want to go? What are some of your goals? And if they don't have goals, that's okay too. This program may provide that space for it. But then we provide them with a long list of about 60 different things related to higher education and ASU, so different units, different skills, different types of experiences in higher education. And we ask them, what are you interested in having conversations about or learning more about? So sometimes you might have someone who is, they may be an admin assistant in one unit, but they're really wanting to learn more about instructional design. And so that might be something that they check. And so I look at all of that as kind of a starting place for when I start matching with the mentor. And then with the mentor, we ask them those same questions. So what is your career trajectory? What have you done so far? Where are you going? And then we ask them to fill out the similar type grid, but with what do they have experience in? And so I look then for, when I do the matching, and I do it by hand using Excel and things like that. There's lots of mentoring matching programs out there. So mine is a little bit probably more old school, but it does really pay more attention to the nuances of each individual person and their file. And so what then I look at is I'll take the I'll take what the mentee's interested in and I'll take our mentor pool for that particular cycle and I'll see where there are some potential matches. What mentors have experience in a lot of the different areas that the mentee is interested in learning more about. And then that comes up with like maybe a list of 10 potential mentors for that person. And then from there, I start kind of digging a little bit more deeper into, again, let's look at the mentee's file. Let's look at these mentors files. And then I also do kind of that same analysis for mentors. So who is the best potential match for a mentor based on their experience and skill set? Sometimes the best match for a mentee and the best match for a mentor are each other, and then like the heavens open up and angels are singing and it's like perfect, but other times it's a little bit, you have to dig a little bit more. And so sometimes it's interesting that the perfect match for a mentor might be a mentee that it didn't make that person didn't make their top 15 list. So it's really interesting to see how when I play around with it. And then from there, I kind of look at things like length of experience. We also, and positions at the university. So for our mentees, we do try to, I always try to match a mentee with a mentor who is at least 2 levels higher than they are within the university system. So for example, someone who is maybe a coordinator senior or an assistant director, I would be looking to match them with someone that is a director. Or a senior director or higher, because they're a little further down the road, they're a little further up the ladder. And so that may be really helpful in terms of for the mentee kind of understanding where they are if they're staying in their in that same position. So I look at all those things. We do have a very thorough review process. So I will go to the mentors and say, I'm thinking of matching you with this person or these people. Are there any potential conflicts? A big thing in our matching process is that the mentor and mentee cannot be from the same unit. The mentor cannot be have any type of supervisory or evaluative power over the mentee. That's really, really important. Ideally, it's a situation where the mentor and mentee don't know each other at all, and they haven't worked together in any type of capacity. Because ASU is very collaborative across units. We sometimes do have situations where they might have worked on a joint project, and at that point, even then it's we try to match them with someone that doesn't have any experience with them prior. And so we ask them to meet. And a lot of times the things that were checked on that matching grid, the skills and interests, serve as the foundation for their mentoring discussions. And I let both the mentor and mentee know this is one of the reasons why I matched you. And then maybe also add some additional points in there as well, based on their files. And so they both have that information, and then they go and they have their first meetings, and they'll find that because they have so much in common already, because you have this person that's interested in all these things that the mentor has experience about. It serves as a good springboard for further discussions. So in the history of our program, of over 350 matches that we've made, only 4 have been what is considered a mismatch and needed to be rematched. So it does, I think, even though it's super time consuming, it does help to really kind of understand the mentee as a person and the mentor as a person, and how might they connect, what similarities and what differences sometimes too can help really build a robust relationship.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it certainly gives people a sense of, there's lots of things to factor in and consider, and that the thoughtfulness that you've put into it really does, lend to having, greater success for matching by addressing power dynamics and potential conflicts, and folks' experience with one another. So thank you for sharing that. You also have built into the program formative and summative evaluation, and there's been some great impact. So I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit about your successes and what impact has this program had on the culture at ASU, and particularly for the goal to sort of create and open those pathways for advancement for staff at ASU.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we look at each cohort, their analysis at the end, and then also kind of looking at it as we think about hosting future cycles of the program. So a lot of the feedback we get from our mentees and our mentors helps inform it. So our program that we actually have now, is grown and evolved, and I think is over the years, and it has been because of that data. So some of the really, I would say that's pretty consistent from year to year to year in terms of the feedback, is that we have a very high satisfaction rate with the program. And I mean that by both the mentee and the mentor describing the mentoring experience with each other, and then also with the program is very positive. On average, it's about anywhere from 93 to 96% saying that they've had a positive or very positive relationship with their mentor, and they've had a very positive relationship with the program. In terms of the impacts, particularly on the mentees, over 60% of the mentees that have gone through the program have seen their career advance at ASU. A lot of them will share, and sometimes it even happens during the program, that they, because a big thing that comes out is over 90% of the mentees that go through the program will say that it has increased their confidence professionally. And that confidence really often helps them to open doors to thinking about, there's all these other things I could do at ASU, or even advancing in my current position. So it helps them to take those steps sometimes that they might not have taken had they not had the encouragement and support from their mentor as well as from the program. So I think, the gains have been very much so in the individual boost in personal confidence and professional confidence, and then taking that leap to going to that next step or learning how to advocate for themselves. And some of the other critical things that have come out is, we do look at this program as being really instrumental for staff retention. Staff in higher education and a lot of universities, there often is a high turnover rate, particularly in certain levels of staff within university systems and things like that. And so recent data that we have is that over 80% of the people who go through this program indicate that they would see themselves staying at ASU for the next 5 years. And we find, HR data that we have, as often as that if an employee will stay past 3 years, they're often here for the long haul. And so that we see this as being a really good vehicle towards promoting staff retention and staff appreciation. And so, I think overall for the mentee, it helps them to advance within the system, to advocate for themselves within the system. It helps them to expand their professional network, both with their mentor and their colleagues, and other different ways. And so we've been very happy with the results of what has come out of it. Our hope too is that we'll be able to continue providing this program. We want everyone who wants to have the chance to take part in it, that they would be able to. And so because we do provide this program, as a side note, we do provide this program completely free of charge to mentee and their unit. So it's a great development opportunity for a mentee that my office covers the costs that are associated with that.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that. I think as folks read through your case study, they're going to find a really great blueprint, an example of how to build a really impactful and successful program for staff in a higher ed environment. So thank you so much for that. And before we go, I want to make sure that I ask you, because I know that there are program coordinators who are listening and watching and thinking about, they're either, in the very early stages of planning or the early stages of development or implementation, and your experience is so invaluable. And knowing that they might be in that position, What do you think when building out a program for staff? What is something that is a must-have?
That's a really super important question. So I would say with any type of formalized mentoring program, and particularly a program that would be serving staff, regardless of the scale or the number of people that are in the program, you definitely need to have dedicated staff support. So a unit that is looking to develop a mentoring program, or maybe an institution that is looking to develop a university-wide program, there needs to be a staff person that is coordinating and leading the development of that program, managing the program throughout, so that there is that constant person there to help move the program forward. What happens with a lot of programs you see is that sometimes they create this program and they'll put the mentee and mentor together and then they send them off, and that's it. And so what happens in those situations is that there's a lot of drop off, that the kind of commitment might wane, or you need someone to be checking in with everyone. How's everyone doing, making sure people are staying on track, that people are meeting with their mentors, a person that's a go-to if there's a problem in the mentoring relationship, right? So maybe the mentee can't get a hold of their mentor, or maybe there's some issue that's going on in the mentoring relationship. There needs to be a staff person there that can either assist with that situation or lead that situation, or at least bring in other resources to help support. So I think that having a dedicated staff person, and in my case, and I think I don't necessarily think that it needs to be 100% of the person's duties. This is definitely would be one part of their portfolio. In my case, this is one part of my large portfolio of programs that I run and manage. But you definitely need to have that institutional support to provide staff to manage and run the program. If you can have more than one person helping with the program, that would even be better. I do it as a one-person office, and it is a lot. I would say the biggest time, the most amount of time and putting together the program comes before the launch. So that's where you're developing everything. You're getting the mentees and mentors matched together, and you're starting the program. Once the program is running, the engagement is not at the same amount of time that it takes at that very first beginning. So that's something to kind of keep in mind also as people are planning, is that leading up to launch is the craziest and the busiest that it'll be. But once the program launches and it's going, then you're like, okay, whew, I can have a cup of coffee now.
That's phenomenal. So in most cases, folks, particularly if they're in the early stages, they can't have everything. But what would be something that's a nice to have if they can?
I would say you definitely want to have a solid mentoring training, and for both the mentors and the mentees. I think if you don't use a professional development component, and that's fine, but you definitely want to have a good starting place for the whole program to grow. And it's really important at the start of a program to align everybody to their expectations for what the program can provide, and to really outline, well, here are the expectations. Here's what our program is going to do. Here's what our schedule is going to be. And this is what mentoring is in the context of this particular program. So that the mentees know that, and the mentors know that as well. And then also in those sessions, providing really solid best practices for mentoring for both the mentor and the mentee. So we spend a lot of time at the very beginning of the program, where a mentee will go through a training session on how to be mentored. And so I think that is definitely a must-have. We often think about the training for mentors, but we don't think about the training for mentees.
Yeah.
So thinking about what the best practices are for your program and for mentees, having that set of trainings for both groups is a must-have. And I would definitely recommend that.
All right. And so knowing that there's probably a lot of stuff we do that isn't really necessary, what do you think is something that folks don't need to worry about and can just live without?
I like to have everything. So I don't know. But I think one of the things we offer in the program is a resource book that a mentor and mentee pick out together, and they can read and utilize in the program. Sometimes people will pick like Brene Brown's book or something like that. And it's a nice have, but I will say that the majority of the mentoring pairs probably don't utilize that book as extensively as you would think. So I don't think you need to necessarily provide resource books, as like something that they would use in the mentoring together, that they would read together or something like that. I think that can go away. Even the Strengths Finder assessment is also, it's nice to have an assessment piece in the program, but you can have the program without that.
Yeah.
I think it is expensive to do it for every single person. And so if you're not able to provide it, I think you could have a really solid program even with.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Karen, so much. I really enjoyed reading through your case study. I think folks will find tremendous value in it. I want to thank you for making the time for our conversation today, for your contribution to the book, and then, of course, the greater contribution you're making to the development of staff on your campus. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share our work of what we're doing. And I do hope that other institutions will consider developing some sort of staff mentoring, because it is such an important part of our university, and in higher education. And it's a great opportunity to honor and recognize the contributions of staff.
Absolutely. Well, if reading your case study doesn't inspire them, I don't know what will, because it certainly is a pathway for success and has had such tremendous impact. So thank you once again for sharing. Thank you all for listening today, and we'll talk to you in our next episode.
Thank you.